Hi, everybody. I haven't live streamed in a while, and I kind of missed that. And I have a brief announcement. It's all fun. And then I'll go on for a couple of minutes, no promises for as long as I'll talk. And you guys can ask me questions. I'll ramble about whatever's on my mind. But my announcement is that I just declared war on the internet. And so I challenge Nick Fuentes, Vaush, Sneeko, Destiny, and Hassan to debate. Those are all separate debates. And I don't want any of these debates to exceed an hour, and they should all be live and moderated. And JREG has offered to moderate, and I can't wait to see what happens. This should be a lot of fun. And if any of you back down, I want you to know that you're a coward. So I did the business side of that for a minute. Let's see what happens. But now you guys can ask me questions, and I'll keep talking as long as I feel like it. So let me tell you the projects I've been working on lately. Um, one of which is I made a video on. Should I spoil the videos that are coming out soon? I'm making a video on the coming population crash, and that's going to come out hopefully very soon. And I think that's the fundamental biggest issue of our society because the way I see our society in the most poignant way is we are a society that tries to hide the fundamental reality of the world, where we spend all of our times dawdling on Epicureanism rather than dealing with the fundamental issues that belie our society. Um, and 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 because of that, we focus on luxuries and we focus on political ideologies as a way to avoid the underlying realities of the world. And I read this interesting book by Seraphim Rose, who was an Orthodox theologian, and he wrote that the modern world is divided between those who try to pretend that we don't have a lack of meaning in our society and those who realize it and go crazy. And that book was written in the 60s, and I think it's gotten more true ever since. And so when you look at our society, the fundamental reality is the birth rate's collapsing. People are going crazy, but we will not focus upon them. And anyone who brings those issues up has an emperor's new clothes moment. And I think that's fundamentally fascinating because for most societies in history, they focused upon some core spiritual truth. And beyond that core spiritual truth, they moved outwards to how to deal with base reality. But in our world, we're materialistic first, in that we focus upon physical material things and then we ignore the broader questions of meaning. And that worked when the industrial world was very wealthy, but now we're seeing it break down. And I think you could view our entire society as trying to ignore this underlying crash that is going to plague our society. So I've been working on the population crash video, and I always wanted to make more historic content, but the things that you guys like and the things that are most meaningful to the population is the geopolitics content, about which is the most topical for our day and age. But I made a Japanese civilization video, and that's going to be coming out soon. And that was a lot of work to research. I read like 6 books in Japan since the new year, and I have a lot of recommendations in that video because so many of the books I read for the Japan video were just terrible, and so I had to. And so I wanted to tell you guys the things that were good to read. And my favorite books in Japan I read were The Chrysanthemum and the Sword by Ruth Benedict. I think that's one of the best anthropology books I've ever read. Um, and Taggart Murphy's book on Japan and the Shackles of the Past was also excellent. Um, and yeah, so I'm excited to be giving you the Japanese civilization video because it's hard to do civilizational research. Um, because for the politics videos, I have a handful of topics that I have studied already, and so I can slot new information in a pre-existing paradigm, like like for example, how demographic numbers relate to modern geopolitics. And for civilizations, I need to figure out on an intuitive basis how that civilization operates. In that each civilization, as Spengler said, is a sort of soul to them and an underlying logic which propels what they're doing. And it's hard to realize that. And so I've read a lot of books on Mesoamerica because I used to live in Mexico. And so for the longest time, I wanted to make a video on Mesoamerican civilization, but it's just exceptionally hard to be able to it's just exceptionally hard to be able to understand the logic under which that society operates. And I figured out for Japan, I've been trying to research a Jewish civilization video, which I know you guys will find very controversial, but the thing with Jewish civilization is it's so long, so complicated, and there are so many different through lines inside of it in which there are many different narratives, and you have to tease out which of those narratives are true. And for the Jewish civilization video, I want to give the different perspectives of Jewish society justice, in which the Jews have covered multiple continents, thousands of years. They've had a lot of enemies who each have different perspectives. And I want to read. There's a book that's like 1,000 pages. I want to read that. And Kevin McDonald, he has some criticisms that I want to read too. I read Paul Johnson's History of the Jews. That was pretty. That was Paul Johnson writes pretty good books. And Will Durant's written a lot on the Jews too. So that's what I've been working on. You guys have seen a lot of my different projects I've been doing right now, in which, so I released the manifesto a couple days ago, and I had the manifesto in my back pocket for like 2.5 years. And if you saw the channel 2 years ago, there wasn't really a place for me to release the manifesto. But I came to the conclusion I need to drop it because I see the currents moving around the world. And once you see the direction things flow in, you start to wonder, what is my responsibility in dealing with this? And that's a really deep question. And it's funny, I look around the world today and I think, what motivates people to continue life? Because I've reached a place where I've achieved the bottom levels of Maslow's hierarchy. I'm pretty satisfied with my life across a bunch of metrics. But once you've been blessed with that, what do you do next? And so that's why I'm doing this, because why not? Why not declare war on the internet? If I die, I die. I know I'm not going to die, but why not? Why did I hike the Appalachian Trail? Why did I drop out of school and move to Mexico? That's just the way the world works. And if you want to go for it, you should go for it. And it's fun. Yeah. So you guys, I'm not going to be here for that long. Like I just wanted to make this video to announce my declaration of war. And so you guys can ask me a couple questions, and I'm going to start. I got to finish a sponsorship for an integration for the population crash video. And I'm narrating the video I'm working on now, which is Top 10 Future Wars. So let me answer some of your questions. Damn, you guys are getting questions so fast I can't see them. Yeah, so Tragedy and Hope. This is a book you guys have been talking about. I leave it on my desk. This is one of the best history books I've read. And it's written in the 1960s, and Carroll Quigley's a really smart guy. And a video I've been wanting to work on for a very long time is I think that in the 1960s, we were on the verge of a intellectual discovery of a new field. Because I think about with history, we often think that science is teleological and that any advance we make has to be made. For example, we think that it was predetermined that we would discover the atom bomb and nuclear technology, but perhaps nuclear technology was implicit upon a previous intellectual discovery that may not have happened in another world. And I think that's more true, where I think in the 1960s, we were on the verge of discovering a science of history in which we could have looked for the patterns in human behavior. And Spengler did this. A lot of my authors I like the most. So Carroll Quigley is one of the best. Let me just pull them off my shelf too. So I'll be back in a second, guys. Just give me a second. Amaury de Raincourt is great. Peter Turchin's great. I think I got a Spengler around here somewhere. Please humor my absence for a moment, people. Azar Gott's good, but he's not of that time period. I'll still bring it over. And yeah, so I think we were on the breakthrough of a philosophic discovery on how the science of history operates. And so Carol Quigley, he's great. I don't like him as much as other authors because I find this book to be written in a very autistic and overly rigid way. And I think he's pulling information from the ancient world that I have no idea how we would have. But this book is good. Oswald Spengler is one of the worst writers I've ever read. And he's got a lot of fascinating ideas, but I wish his editor just forced him to be better. And Amaury de Réaucourt. A lot of you would know that Amaury de Réaucourt is one of my favorite writers, and he was a French Orientalist of the 1960s. And Amaury de Réaucourt made a couple brilliant intellectual breakthroughs, where The Coming Caesars is about the comparison of the Greeks to the Europeans and the Americans to the Romans. And it's comparable to Oswald Spengler's civilizational cycles, but the comparison of classical and European civilization. And Amaury de Réaucourt, he also wrote a brilliant book on India, and he wrote a brilliant book on China. And for people who want to understand those societies, the Amaury de Réaucourts on both of those topics are, they're just incredibly brilliant. And it's hard to fundamentally understand those societies. He also wrote The Eye of Shiva, which was a book that had a big influence on making me religious. And The Eye of Shiva was comparing the results of ancient Hinduism to modern science. And he talked about how he thought Hinduism resulted in the development of modern science. No, sorry, Hinduism was able to reach implicitly similar conclusions to modern science through a different method of intellectual discovery we have not yet discovered. And what I think is fascinating is that we, as I said before, we view intellectual development as something that happened. It's teleological, and what teleological means is that every level of development in what happens is what has to have happened, and so you have. We think that modern science is a rational conclusion, but the reality is it's built upon implicit assumptions in Christianity or previous parts of the Western logical tradition. And I think there are completely new fields of thought that we haven't yet discovered. And so for my video on the spirit world, you guys might have seen that, where I believe that there are completely new paradigms. And so people would ask me, Rudyard, do you believe in aliens? And what I'd say is, I have no idea, because the level of comprehension we would have to understand aliens would be, could you explain to the ancient Babylonians how electricity worked? And the ancient Babylonians didn't have the concept of machines or natural law. I have no idea how the universe works, no idea if aliens exist, because I think we don't even know the questions to ask in those departments. And so I think you could have complete intellectual trajectories that don't exist inside our current paradigm, and thus we haven't developed them. Peter Turchin's great. We've talked a lot about him before. He makes the computer models that try to figure out when countries have revolutions. Azargat, this is my favorite history book ever, and it's a history of humanity through the lens of war. And so Azargat explains human civilization, and he explains how war evolved in the human condition. He also explains various historic processes through war, why the West rose to dominance, why the East developed these giant empires that decayed over the last 1,000 years, why America became a global power. If you want to understand how I see the world, I'd recommend reading War and Human Civilization by Azargat. Amaury de Réaucourt, this is my favorite book of his, and it's how the relations between men and women have changed the course of history. Yeah, so this is Tragedy and Hope, and this book is great. And I went on that whole rant because someone asked me about this book. And this book is the civilizational history of the 20th century. And I think to understand our history, we need to comprehend it through the broad perspective of the human condition over thousands of years. And that's what this book does. And so he talks about the trends of the 20th century, what it means. And this is one of the most profound books I've read on a bunch of different levels. And it's a pretty thick book. So he covers a lot of different concepts. But the tragedy was the collapse of, first of all, the world wars for obvious reasons, but the collapse of freedom. And all of those authors, they're running around World War II. They agreed that the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the collapse in freedom, which occurred due to the rise of the managerial revolution with government bureaucracies. And they all predicted the managerial revolution would break down freedom and would break down ideas of individual agency. And they also, the managerial class would cut down the creatives out of envy. I think that's fundamentally what's happened in the real world. So that was fun. I'm not going to be here for much longer. Ask me some questions, bro. Whenever I say that, so I am Christian. One of the questions said, you said you're Christian, but you don't seem to believe, you seem to believe in God as an idea. I'm Christian. I believe that God is an actual physical force that acts in the world. But in my channel, my personal views are not what I say on the channel. I mean, nothing I say on the channel is stuff I don't believe, but I am privately more religious than I am on the channel because the purpose of my channel is to logically explain things. And so I'm here to explain anthropology. And so I explain why religious people believe the things they do in terms agnostics or atheists would understand. Um, this is fun. Y'all are degenerates. Hmm. So my favorite video game of all time, I think Warhammer Total War is pretty dope. I loved Rise of Nations growing up. Rise of Nations is a combination of and Civilization and Age of Empires, where you do base building and you control a nation over its entire history. And yeah, I'm going to be going at the 20-minute mark. This is, your questions are going too fast for me to read them. I'm just going to say random stuff. What do I have around my house? So this is an Afghan battle knife. I keep it at my desk. It's pretty cool. I mean, I don't know why a man wouldn't keep a giant knife at his desk. I collect skulls too. This is a Mexican skull I keep. When I lived in Mexico, I bought this. I've nearly died 4 times. And so I like to keep skulls around my house so that I'm grateful that I'm still alive. And I'm purposely putting out weird and schizo stuff because I'm just filling time here. So I've been through a lot of different things in my life. And so I always tell myself when I'm in a good place, which I am now. And the reason I'm going on all this adventure is because I just need the YOLO. So I always tell myself when I'm in a good place to be grateful for having what I have, because the thing I dislike the most about modernity is the lack of gratitude for just, and this is a video I've wanted to make for the longest time, but I don't think it would do well financially, is things to be grateful for in modernity. So I'm grateful for the ability to fly to France in 10 hours. I'm grateful for I live in Texas now. I'm grateful. There's a great book called Mosquito Empires, which talks about how the entirety of the South was nigh uninhabitable for white people in the pre-industrial era. If you were in Texas, you had to worry about malaria. That's not true anymore. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for having a clean food supply, or being able to buy food in the winter. This is more of a stoic skull. I've got a couple others, but I'm going to get going soon. Cool. Well, okay, this has been fun. I'm going to get going. I might do this at another time. Peace.